drop the dishes, and let's get jacked! What? Welcome everyone to another episode of the Mere Mortal Book Reviews. As you might surmise here on this very podcast, we do review books. And what have we got today? Well, we have got Picnic in the Storm by Yukiko Motoya, translated by Asa Yoneda. So this book was published in 2018, 209 pages in length. I'd say it took me 5 hours of reading to get through. It's not super dense. The pages themselves are maybe 20 something lines per page, and there's a lot of space on these pages, so you'll fly through it pretty quick. It's a set of 11 stories, which I'm just trying to see if they've got a list at the front here. They don't. Oh, yeah, here we go. So, The Lonesome Bodybuilder, Fitting Room, Typhoon, I Called You By Name, An Exotic Marriage, Paprika Joe, How to Burden the Girl, The Women, Q&A, The Dogs, The Straw Husband. And so we get through all of those pretty quickly. So it'd be, like 30 pages, a short story, something like that. Although there is one big one called An Exotic Marriage, which takes up about the third of the book, I would say. So, yeah, varying length of these short stories. They somewhat remind me of the X-Files. If you've ever watched that show, I never particularly watched it, but I've got snippets over the years of what that was. Or if you're an Australian, here's a reference for you. Round the Twist, which was these kind of paranormal activities. They weren't straight horror, but they did have elements of danger to them. And these stories are somewhat like that. They take these kind of real life situations and then they have this absurd twist to it. Sometimes it's just absurd for the sake of being absurd. And then other times you're like, oh, geez, this stuff scares me. And this sort of stuff has always scared me. Round the Twist, for example, that show, I could not watch it, even though it'd just be like a stuffed fox that comes to life or something. It's just creepy. It's weird. It's, it's just something's off. It's like the uncanny valley with robots and how we're getting into like people's faces, and it's like it kind of looks like them, but it's not exactly perfect, so you're a bit creeped out. This is what this book is about. So what are the sort of things in it here? Well, we'll have a story about a woman whose husband is made of straw, and everyone's kind of like just okay with it, but he's like slowly losing his straw. We'll have these couples who become too similar, and so they meld into this kind of like one snake eating its own tail Ouroboros type of deal. We've got a brutal evil gang which comes and like kills this lady's children, and they fight it off all the time. Turns out these children were actually like her incest children with her husband slash father, and the evil gang is directed by her like evil stepmother, and it's like, oh, okay, what the fuck? There's these flying umbrella people who get caught in a typhoon and they just fly off with their umbrellas. Mostly first person point of view, so we're in this kind of character's mind, and the characters are usually women from what I recall in the book, although they're sometimes men as well. And yeah, you're just kind of like thrust into the deep end of really quickly, rapidly into the story itself. So what are some of the, I guess, like questions, themes that might come from this? Well, they are all short stories, so you're not getting too deep into anything. What it did get me thinking about was just creativity in general. So that they're extremely creative because they're basically just a normal everyday life situation. Like woman goes to work, or woman is bored and needs to do something, or relations with you're talking to this elderly neighbor and then you find out like, oh, her cat is peeing all the time, and this is causing troubles and things like this. So the twist is she adds something to it. Something's just a bit off or a lot off, and yet the people just kind of go along with it. And it did get me thinking, like, does this happen in our everyday lives and we don't notice it? And this might be why people will claim to see ghosts and things like this. And maybe I'm not one of those people who really believe in that, but am I just ignoring these things that I probably should? If I like really sat down and analyzed, I'd go, you know what? That is really weird. That is just such a strange thing to happen. Why am I in this gym with all of these people around me? I don't know really any of them. And there's music playing and we're all just like lifting these arbitrary weights and doing these weird things with our bodies. Like, what the hell's going on here? And I think you can get examples of this when you go traveling. So I've traveled to Japan before, and that's a pretty bizarre place. There's a lot of things there which you'll see like, wait, this wouldn't happen in my own country. For example, you'd be out late at night there's no cars on the road, and there'll be someone waiting for the pedestrian crossing to change and the lights to change, and they're just so, kind of like conformist, if you want to put it one way, or adhering to the rules in a perhaps more positive light, where they won't cross the road until the light changes, and it's just a social norm there. Whereas here in Australia, it'd be like, oh yeah, whatever, I'll just cross the road. There's no point in waiting. Like, why am I waiting for no reason? So you get all of these things where you think, okay, is this a cultural thing? Perhaps, if I went to Syria, would they do some things that are completely bizarre? And I think you would see that, but it wouldn't defy the laws of physics, which is what happens a lot in here, especially with people flying off in the typhoon and with their umbrellas and things like that. But it did have that mix as well, where it was like this creativity of the author as well, where it just made me think like, man, I would not be able to come up with a story like this. I would not be able to think of a lonesome body. It's such a simple concept. The thing that drew me to this book, The Lonesome Bodybuilder, which was the first story, was about this woman who's just like bored and decides to get jacked. She just gets ripped, like fucking ripped. And so there's so many just funny, like weird, wacky events in here, which are weird and wacky for varying reasons. Some because they're physically impossible and defy the laws of gravity. Others, it's just because, that's the norm. And I really could imagine in the future, if we're living in a more technological society, or even through our, VR headsets and things like that, where it's just normal to see, a 50-foot monster walking around the streets, and you interact with the monster somehow because it's just a person cosplaying as a monster. I could 100% see all of those sorts of things happening. So really cool. I did enjoy that aspect of the themes, I guess, what arose, the questions in my mind. Now, let's just jump onto the author, Yukiko Motoya, extremely talented lady. So she's a novelist, playwright, theater director, voice actor. She's won all these things. And, I saw the picture in the back, which is the picture you'll see on your screen right now. And, I just looked at it. I didn't actually read her little bio here. And it's like, was born in Ishikawa Prefecture in Japan in 1979. This lady is a witch. Look how, I don't know how old that photo is, but I'm pretty sure she's one of those just like, Japanese ladies, Asian ladies who you think they're like 23 or 25. And she's like, oh, I'm 56. So, I kind of believe this is probably just like autobiographical stories, because she's probably like lived in such a parallel witch world where this is just normal for her, all these things. It's just crazy. So yeah, check out if she's not a witch, she's at least some sort of pixie. Okay, that's how we're going to put it. So in terms of the actual writing and the style, extra details, Japanese writing I think is very distinct. I've only read 3, maybe 4 authors, a couple of their books. If you go onto the book review channel, a lot of Yukio Mishima, I really like him. Haruki Murakami, one's done a couple of them. I've read some of his books before, 1Q84, for example. And who else? Osamu Dazai, No Longer Human. And I think I've read a couple of the older ones, like the Samurai Swordsman, but I'm forgetting his name off the top. Miyamoto Musashi, something like that. Musashi? Yeah, something like him, which is just very old Japanese, so I won't even count that. But their style is, if I had to put it in one word, I'd say reserved. It's a very reserved style where it's not super extravagant with the words. You feel these characters, like the emotions that come out of them are not what you'll see in like a Latino book, for example. If you're going to go and read something like Cien Años de Soledad, 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, the characters are completely different. So I think, especially when they have a Japanese character, like all of these are set in Japan, the characters reflect the Japanese culture, which is a very reserved culture. They're not going to cross the street unless the sign says them to. There's a lot of politeness. There's a lot of that wrapped up within this. And I think you see this in the writing style as well, where, it's kind of interesting when it's on kind of gigantic topics or themes or these just things that are actually very emotional connected. So Yukio Mishima, for example, probably why I like him the most is he tackles these themes, which are these, grand, like what is it to be Japanese, the passion, the fire of going out to sea, for example, or, having a loved one, or not feeling like you're part of society and wanting to burn it all down. And these are the kind of the themes that you'll see in all of his books. The Pavilion of the Golden Temple, for example. I think that really works well with their reserve style because you get this nice contrast. When it comes to everyday life, yeah, I tend to just go, I don't think this style is great for that. So this leads directly into my kind of like final summary themes. Honestly, I was expecting a whole book on the lonesome bodybuilder. That is why I actually picked this out. So when I got Picnic in the Storm, I knew it had the lonesome bodybuilder in it, and I thought it was like, they just changed the title or something, and it was going to be a whole book on a middle-aged lady who just decides to get jacked, which I really wanted to read about. That's the book I wanted to read about. And so when it switched over into these other short stories, I was kind of confused at first, and then I went like, crap, it's a book of short stories, which is not my typical read. And if you've listened to this channel before, I'm just not that into short stories. I find it really hard to connect with them because they just go so rapidly. You can't get into these deeper themes. My themes and questions, for example, that was not the typical themes and questions that I'll talk about. So, look, this was no exception. I did find this a bit bland overall. There's no problem with her creativity. The short stories themselves are really great, and the concept she brings up with them, things I would not think of. They're funny, they're humorous, they're interesting, but I just couldn't connect with them. I just couldn't get my kind of claws into them and really, really dig into some of the interesting things that were perhaps beneath, and that would be allowed to be explored by, what is going through the mind of a middle-aged lady when she just decides to pick up bodybuilding. I want to know that. I want to know that story. And I just wasn't able to get into it. So overall, there's nothing wrong with her creativity, her writing. It's just the format. The format of short stories is not my favorite. So Picnic in the Storm by Yukiko Motoya. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. I can't particularly recommend it. It reminds me of Gold's Book of Fish, actually. I think is Richard Flanagan, in terms of like the really randomness, the things occurring in everyday life, or in this case, it would be a prison setting, but just weird stuff is happening. And that book is different because it is a long extended book. So I probably preferred that to this one here. So that is it for today. Thank you, everyone. And you might notice the change up. So I did really want to experiment with some new things here and basically just make this shorter, more condensed, and more easily available for people, and perhaps give a bit more passion into my book reviews, because I used to approach it with a more methodical style. So now I've got my notes, but they're not as detailed nor as extensive as before. So I do want to give a massive thanks to Cole. Thank you, Cole, my voice actor from the last, 10 episodes, something like that. It was a fun go of it. I really enjoyed it. He's great at doing voice acting, but especially because I'm going to be traveling to Brazil in a month and a half. I'm not going to be able to do the same sort of format, the quotes, taking pictures of the books. I'm going to be using a Kindle or ebook reader, things like that. It's just a bit different. So I wanted to keep this shorter, keep this snappier. And Cole, if you do want to know more about that, on the Value for Value podcast, you'll see the actual title, the screenshot for that, the thumbnail of that on your screen right now. I'm going to be kicking that off in a week or two, and Cole is going to be helping me out with some more book review quotes there. So if you really enjoyed his voice acting, I'd recommend checking out that channel. I'll give you a reminder in the next week or two when that is out. Just a reminder here, this is a Value for Value podcast. I really do appreciate you providing value back for the stuff that I put up front here. You're going to notice there's no ads on this. There's no sponsorships. There's no, book authors asking me to read their books and me, changing or influencing my thoughts and decisions based on external circumstances, which means I'm doing this all for free, all free up front. And so I just ask that you return that value in some shape or form. Obviously, if you're watching the YouTube video, there's easy ways of doing that: liking, subscribing, commenting, sharing. All those sorts of things are really helpful. I want to know your thoughts at home. How could I make this better? If I'm going to do this shorter format, is a synopsis necessary? Do you still think is that something what you want? What would you want to hear in a book review that would make you go, okay, I do want to get this book, even if it's a book which perhaps I don't highly rate? I'd love to know these things. Or if it's a book that I'm not going to love, should I even do a book review on it? All of these sorts of things. How can I make this audio better, the video better, visual elements? Do you want me to still read out quotes like I used to? All these sorts of things. I'd love to know that. I'd also love for you to join me live. So I am live here, 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. I see Andrea Artist, says, thanks, sweetie. I only joined at the end. That's a shame. And Johnny as well. Hi, hope you're having a good week. I hope you are too, Johnny. I hope you are too. These book reviews are going to be shorter and snappier. So join me 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, which basically is UTC 0. So wherever you are in the world, you're in Azerbaijan and maybe your time zone is +5. I'm not actually sure, guessing off the top of my head. Or you're in the United States and it's -10 or -6, something like that. From Wednesday midnight, just minus that number and you'll be like, oh, Kyron's live on Wednesday evening at this time. Oh, Kyron's live, Thursday morning at this time. So that is how you can join in live. Obviously, you can do it via the Mere Mortals Book Reviews YouTube channel. This is also live on the podcasting app. So if you didn't have access to YouTube for whatever reason and you wanted to just listen to the audio, you can also join in on apps like Fountain, Podverse, Podcast Guru, Curiocaster, True Fans. They're able to do that. I'll leave it here for today. I was just going to say I will be going to Brazil soon. So Johnny has asked, please tell us about your trip when you get back. Are you bringing a book for the plane? I like your longer reviews. Okay, Johnny, thank you. I'll take that into consideration. I'm going to try this shorter format for a little bit. And perhaps when I'm in Brazil and have more time, I'll give you updates. Don't worry about that, because I plan on going for about 4 months. So I don't want to leave you hanging that whole time. So thank you everyone for joining me. Shorter updates, but perhaps I can do some other. If you'd like to hear some more different type of content as well, please let me know. And I'd love to expand this book reviews channel as well and perhaps do some other things, experiments. So we'll leave it there for today. Thank you everyone. Ciao for now. Kyron out. Bye.